Hello and welcome to English Digest. I'm Seb.
And I'm Elsie.
And we are back for another writing assignment unit. Today we're going to be doing a topic-based writing assignment, and we're talking all about consumption. And okay, before you get carried away, I don't mean eating lots of food. I don't mean consuming things. I mean consumption. C-O-N-S-U-M-P-T-I-O-N, which basically means buying and spending. So, you shop, basically. When you go shopping, you consume things.
Okay, 所以我们今天要说的是 consumption, 代表消费。
For today's assignment, today we're going to be looking back at all those purchases that we don't feel so great about, or worse, we really regret. Let's check out today's instructions. So today's assignment reads, it happens to us sometimes. We buy something without thinking about it twice because it just looks tempting in the commercials. Later, we realize the product we bought isn't helpful or isn't useful at all, and it even makes life worse. Write an essay describing the most useless thing you've ever bought in at least 120 words and at least 2 paragraphs.
OK, 所以我们今天要写的是关于呢，多数人呢在购物前往往会透过各类的广告或是听从他人的推荐，然后初步的了解想要购入的产品。不过呢，这些间接的管道，他们不是100%可靠。所以买家取得商品之后呢，才发现它根本不实用，或者是与当初所想的有极大的落差。那请你写一篇英文的作文，描述一件你购买后发现最没有用处的商品。注意哦，是最没有用处的。除了说明这个商品为何之外呢，你还要去说明它没有用处的原因、实体与原先想象的落差，以及它带给你的感受。然后一样，我们的文章必须至少要120个单字，而且呢必须分段。
Wow, looking at this assignment, I can certainly think of a few things I've bought that just ended up gathering dust.
What do you mean by gathering dust?
Right, when we say something gathers dust, we mean that we never use it for anything. It's just lying around the house getting dusty. It's a waste of our money and a waste of space. Sounds pretty useless, right? What would even be worse is to say that something is more trouble than it's worth. When we use this, we mean that something new that we buy or own ends up causing more problems than the benefits it brings. In other words, more trouble than it's worth means something that makes your life worse, like we saw in the assignment. So Elsie, have you ever bought something that's just gathering dust today, or have you bought something that was more trouble than it was worth?
所以 gathering dust, gather 是聚集，那就是聚集灰尘的东西，就是买来不用的。Always, I've bought a ton of clothes, but I only wear some of them, so the rest just sit there gathering dust. What about you?
Okay, so about 3 or 4 months ago, I bought a diffuser, one of those special things that gives out very nice smelling air for your bedroom. They look really cool. Exactly. And it looked really good and it was cheap. I think I got it on Shopee. And by the first 2 days I used it, it was really good. But then it leaked all over my bedside table. So all of my stuff got wet and then it broke. So it definitely was more trouble than it was worth, because then I didn't just have a broken diffuser, it damaged a bunch of my other things as well. So definitely have that experience.
Right, so always needs to be careful when shopping online. But at least your stuff smells good.
Yeah, it certainly does. My trashy stuff smells great. Okay, so now we have an idea of all the horrible shopping decisions we have made in the past. It's time for us to talk about how we're going to develop our approach. For today's assignment, we need to write a descriptive passage. So we're writing all about the object and the story behind it. For this kind of assignment, we need to include lots of clear, objective language that gives the reader a good idea of what this horrible thing we purchased was. We also need to talk about the story behind our purchase, why we bought it, and why we were so unsatisfied with our purchase afterwards. Tell us more, Elsie.
OK， 所以呢，我们要先来厘清什么是叙述文。叙述文呢，它是一种运用非常广泛的文体，常常出现在大考的作文题目中哦。那常见的类型有什么呢？像是第一种，描述经验或事件；第二种，描述物品；第三种，描述人物。那我们这个单元呢，要叙述的是自己买过最没有用的商品，属于对物品的叙述。
You might notice that this assignment is quite similar to some previous month's writing assignments. Back in August, for example, we talked about writing travel reviews. There are some important similarities between that unit and this one. Just with our August assignment, we need to write clear and detailed descriptions that aren't too dramatic. We also want to include our feelings and reflections about the experience. However, unlike our August assignment, unlike writing travel reviews, what you're doing this time is writing a more personal story. So you can afford to be a bit more emotional in your writing. If you think the video game you bought was terrible, for example, then say it was terrible. Let the reader know how frustrated you were with it when you first sat down to play. This is your time to really get into your poor purchasing decisions and how they made you feel.
没错，藉由这篇作文呢，你可以好好的抒发到底买来的东西有多烂、多没用，或者是呢，这个实际你收到的商品和广告上看起来差别有多大、有多不一样。那你可以试着让读者大开眼界，让他们对你买来这个没有用的东西感到印象深刻。
Exactly. In terms of structure, today's assignment follows many of the other narrative and descriptive assignments that we've covered before. We're going to be using the Hamburger Structure. What does that mean again? The Hamburger Structure is a classic way of putting together your essay. Just like a delicious hamburger in real life, the Hamburger Structure is made up of three main ingredients. First, you have your introduction, which is the top bun of the burger. In your introduction, you're going to want to lay out the main ideas that you're going to be exploring in your written passage. Next comes the body, the meat of the burger, which is arguably the most important part of the passage, and your lunch. The body should include supporting details in the case of this passage, and in the case of this passage, develop a clear storyline from what you thought the product would be like when you set out to buy it, and then go on to your reaction when you finally discovered what the product was really like. Lastly, we have the conclusion, which is the bottom bun of your burger. It's the part that holds the whole thing together. So just like the bottom bun of a real burger, it holds the story that you've written before, it holds the meat and the top bun, and it ties everything together with some final thoughts or adds some opinion of your experience buying useless things.
Okay, so Hamburger Structure， 我们的汉堡结构又来咯。所以在这篇作文当中，我们要怎么写什么？英文作文的架构一样基本上分为引言 Introduction、文章主体 Body， 还有就是结论 Conclusion。那这一篇呢，描述事物的叙述文呢，也是以此架构发展的，就是刚刚 Seth 提到的汉堡结构 Hamburger Structure。那 Introduction 是文章的引言，说明书写此篇文章的动机。全文的主旨句，也就是 Thesis Statement， 常常在第一段就会点出来哦。在描述事物的文章当中Introduction 可以有以下几种方式。第一个，直接说明是什么事物以及它的特别之处。第二个，简单说明或比较你和一般人对这个事物的看法。
I couldn't have put it better myself. When we're getting into our introduction, we also really need to think about that thesis statement. This is a sentence that you will include in your introduction that clearly states and lays out the purpose of your writing. So, for example, the thesis statement might be, for this writing assignment, might be, last week I bought one of the most useless video games I've ever spent money on. Okay, so that's very clear, it's very obvious what we're going to be talking about, and it gives the reader a good idea of how your assignment is going to continue.
好，所以呢，这一课的主旨句呢，可以是刚刚 Seth 说到的句子，也就是上周我买了一个最没用的电动。那再来，我们会进到 body， 也就是文章的主体，通常是过程的叙述，必须要叙述许多相关的细节，就是 supporting details。像是呢， 第一种，何时、何地、何人 when, where, who。再来就是发生的原因、过程和结果 why, how, what。那细节呢，必须要和主题相关，要让主题更生动，要让人印象深刻。那在叙述的过程当中呢，要特别注意时态的一致性或连贯性，可以依照时间的先后、难易的程度或重要性等顺序来叙述。
As I said earlier, the conclusion should wrap up your passage by offering some final opinions or reflections on the passage. So, for example, you could talk about the lessons you learned by buying a useless product, or you could offer some advice to the reader about how they can shop more wisely in the future.
Right, so you can write about what you learned from this experience. 也就是在 conclusion 文章的结论当中呢，你再次简单的强调此人事物和主题的关系，还有对你有什么启示、体会、影响或改变等等的。那这样的方式啊，可以让文章完整，也可以呼应第一段你所写下来的内容。Okay, and then we are going to brainstorm, right?
We are. We're going to move on to our brainstorming activity. So, what do we need to know for this?
在这次的写作内容当中啊，重点是在于你对这件商品的预期和实际的情况，两者之间落差越大，越能够凸显这商品的无用之处。
For today's brainstorming exercise, we're going to look at the differences between expectations and reality. I suppose we all encounter this kind of problem from time to time, don't we? Have you ever been a victim of false advertising,
Elsie?False advertising 代表是假的、不实的广告。And yes, I have been a victim of false advertising. Once I saw a really beautiful dress online and I bought it, but when I got the product, I was so disappointed because the color was not right. And after I tried it on, the dress was way too short, so I couldn't even wear it.Outside of my house.
Oh no. And if it's too short, you can't make it longer. If it's too long, you can make it shorter.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was
frustrating.
A waste of money.
Yeah, that's definitely a case of false advertising. If they made it look longer and made it look like a different color. Okay, let's take a look at our brainstorming chart and you'll see why I asked Elsie a bit about false advertising. So as you can see, we have our thesis statement here, the most useless thing I ever bought in a video game, ever bought a video game called Incredible Fighter. Okay, so that's a very simple thesis statement. And then what our flowchart here has done is divided our points, the things we want to talk about, into two categories. We've got in the ads, so things that you saw online or in commercials or even just your expectations. And then the second one is in reality. So this would be after you've bought it, when you've got the product and what it really was like. So what do we have in the ads? They've put, the game looked like the best thing ever. The fighters' moves looked cool. And it seemed fast and fun, okay? So notice these are all things that the person thought or saw the game might be like or what they thought the game would be like. So you might want to use words like seemed or appeared, those kind of words which aren't things that you know, they're things that you think about a thing. So in your first column, you can put your opinions and your views of the products before you bought it. In the second one, you can go on to talk about your experience after you bought the product, okay? So think about your negative experiences, the way it was different, like Elsie, your dress was too short. You could put that in this column, or you could put it was the wrong color. And yeah, you can maybe focus on the negative stuff here because we're talking about the most useless thing you've ever bought.
好的，在我们的 brainstorming 这个部分当中呢，你看到最上面的是主旨句，也就是我们刚刚说的 Thesis Statement， 然后有两个箭头分出来，一个是你在 ads， 也就是广告里面看到的讯息，跟 reality 现实当中你收到这个产品之后的一切想象的幻灭，结果是什么，事实是什么，你可以把它写出来。好，所以分成两个框框。那两个框框刚刚 Seb 有提到了，所以呢这边都是广告和真实商品对比的部分。 And then we'll move on to our outline.
Exactly. Now that we've got a clear idea of what we're talking about, it's time for us to prepare our outline. Remember, an outline is a quick planning device that will help you get your ideas in order so that you don't have to spend too much time writing one part of your passage. Nothing is worse or more frustrating in a writing exam than realizing halfway through the given time that you've spent way too long on your introduction and don't have time to write a balanced body and conclusion. Because just as we have a good hamburger, it has 3 equal pieces, we don't want a massive piece of bread and then a tiny piece of meat and a tiny bottom bun. We want it to be nice and balanced. So none of us actually really know exactly how we're going to tell a story when we first sit down to write it. So your outline is going to help you make sure that you're putting enough in your introduction, enough in your body, and enough in your conclusion so that you have a nice balanced story when you've finished. Okay, let's take a look at the first paragraph. Okay, so that's our topic sentence. The most useless thing I've ever bought was the video game Incredible Fighter. Okay, so this topic sentence isn't just the topic sentence for our paragraph, it's also the topic sentence for our whole written assignment. So this is really your thesis statement. It says, I saw it in some ads. It looked like the best game ever. The fighters in it had cool moves. It seemed fast and fun. I saved up all my pocket money to buy it. So what we can see in this first paragraph is the writer is focusing on the first column of your brainstorming chart. They're just talking about their impressions of the game when they first bought it, but they're not really talking about the experience of owning the game. They do talk about how they made an effort to buy it. You know, they saved up all their pocket money, so it wasn't easy for them to get the game, but they don't talk about what it was like owning the game. So we're really talking about the expectation, and then in the second part, we get onto the reality, don't we, Elsie?
Right. 所以呢，第一段的地方，你会先写到的是你对这个产品的想象，还有从它的广告中你看到的样子、看到的内容。然后呢，到了第二段的时候，你会有一个主题句 number 2，然后这个主题句可以是The game turned out to be no different from other fighting games。也就是我收到这个游戏之后，发现它跟其他的打斗游戏没什么不同啊。然后你要用更多的 details， 更多的细节去支撑你这样子的一个说法。所以 A, it was a disappointment， 是个令人失望的东西。B, it was worse than the games I already had， 更糟的是呢，比我现在有的游戏还要烂，还要不好。It was slow， 很慢。Making the fighters use their best moves was hard。你要让这些打斗的里面角色用他们最棒的这个打斗技巧是很困难的一件事情，所以这个是执行上面的困难。然后再来是他的感觉 I feel bored after 30 minutes， 30分钟之后我就觉得无聊了。陈述完这些细节来支撑第二段的主题句之后呢，就会到了 conclusion 的部分。
Exactly. As we've only got 120 words, our conclusion is going to be quite short. But I like what the example does. It offers a quick, clear sentence which explains what the writer learned from the experience of buying a terrible video game. Our conclusion is, I've learned a lesson about not believing everything I see in commercials. And I think we've all been taken for a fool once or twice by commercials. When you're taken for a fool, that means someone attempts to trick you, or you believe something that's not true, which is kind of what happened in our first written passage. Okay, let's take a short break here and then go on to our first writing example. Basic sample. The most useless thing I've ever bought is a video game. It is called Incredible Fighter. I saw some commercials for it, and it looked like the best game ever. The fighters looked so cool, and the game seemed really fast and fun. I saved up all my pocket money until I had enough to purchase the game. Then I was ready to play. What a disappointment! The game turned out to be no different from other fighting games I played. In fact, it was considerably worse than several I already owned. It was slower than it looked in the ad, and it was hard to make the fighters do their best moves. After 30 minutes, I was already bored. What a disappointing waste of time and money. I've certainly learned my lesson, and I won't believe everything I see in commercials. Okay, I can definitely empathize with this sample because this kind of happened to me before. I also bought something online and then was very disappointed when I got them.
What was the stuff you bought?
It was a couple of years ago. I got some swimming shorts on Instagram, and they were swimming shorts that were supposed to change color. So like when you got them wet, they would change from blue to purple.
Wow,
and they looked
cool.
really cool. Yeah, they sound really cool, and the video looked really cool. And I got it. I bought it straight away, and we went to Baishawan, and I wore the shorts, and I got my friend to film it when I ran into the sea because I was like, oh, they're gonna go blue when I go in the sea, and then they didn't change. And
One bit? They
it didn't change at all. They stayed the same color, and basically, it's because it was with temperature. And because Taiwan is very warm, it's too warm for the temperature where they change color. So they didn't mention that it was a certain temperature. And so I just bought some expensive blue swimming shorts, basically.
Okay, so the product is not from Taiwan then?
No, it's not from Taiwan. And so it was kind of useless. I've never really worn them since.
Okay, 所以呢，在这个 basic sample 基本的作文当中呢，我们会看到他用的是开门见山法，也就是一开头就告诉我们到底发生了什么事情，也就是 the most useless thing I've ever bought is a video game。然后带出呢自己对商品的期许，在广告看到的内容，然后第二段再接出转折 ，What a disappointment! The game turned out to be no different from other fighting games I'd played。最后呢，结论之处再点出自己学到的教训，以及呢未来不会再让同样的事情发生。所以你会发现结构非常的清楚明了，而且呢让人家简单易懂。
Exactly. Okay, I just want to look at one word from this sample, and then we can get onto the advanced one because we don't have so much time left. There's this phrase, turn out to be, which I think is very important to this one. And turn out to be basically means ended up being, or in the end was. So we're basically saying, in the end, the game was much worse than I expected. The game turned out to be much, much worse than I expected. We normally use turn out to be when the end result of something goes against our expectations. For example, if you think your English exam is going to be very hard, but then it's easy, you can say the exam turned out to be easier than I expected.
所以使用这个句型的时机，就是当你原先的想象跟后来结果不一样的时候，你可以用 turn out to be 来表示。
Exactly. Okay, let's get on to our advanced sample. Advanced sample. There are plenty of useless products, but there are just as many people who fall victim to their sales tactics. My experience with this was when I bought an easy wipe. Though this gadget seemed like a godsend when I first saw it on TV, I couldn't have been more wrong. The day I bought it, I'd just come home and plopped down on the sofa to numb my mind with some TV. I turned to the shopping channel, and my interest was immediately piqued by what the salespeople were pitching. A long, wand-like device that could hold your toilet paper for you so you could wipe without touching yourself. It seemed brilliant. This would help my grandma, who had arthritis, and it'd make using the toilet more hygienic than ever. I immediately called the number on the screen to order what I thought would be a life-changing product. When the Easy Wipe finally came, I was ecstatic. However, when I tried it later, I straight away began to regret my decision. The angle of the device made it difficult to use without sticking it to the toilet, and it wouldn't let go of the toilet paper without a few violent shakes. I also realized everyone in my family would be sharing this, which was extremely unsanitary. I was forced to admit defeat and put the Easy Wipe away for good. Undoubtedly, this product that I thought essential turned out to be the most useless thing I've ever bought. Wow. Okay, I'm glad that the writer reached that conclusion that it would be unsanitary, because when I was reading this, I was thinking, I don't think I want to buy something for wiping my bottom and then share it with my family. That seems it seems very unclean, very unsanitary, which basically means not clean or dirty or bad for your health.
也就是不卫生的。
Exactly.
Yeah.
What did you think of this passage, Elsie?
Okay, I like his third paragraph. The first sentence in the third paragraph is when the easy wipe finally came, I was ecstatic. I was super happy. However, 对他把这个转折做得更多. He was happy at first, but it turned out to be a bad product.
I had all these great expectations, and then it turned around. So yes, there's a lot of really good vocabulary in here. I think one really cool word that they use at the first paragraph is godsend. Okay, so godsend, I think there's a 成语 for godsend, isn't there? Or there's a phrase in Chinese for godsend.
天赐之物, it is not a 成语.
Oh, it's just 4 characters. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, a godsend. It's kind of, there's a clue in it. If you look closely at the English, it's God send. So it's something amazing that almost seems like it was given to you by God or given to you from heaven. So something amazing that really helps you or changes your life. And so a godsend doesn't actually have to be a physical object or product. It doesn't have to be an easy wipe. It could be, for example, the help that someone gives you or someone's attitude in a difficult situation. So I could say, for example, Elsie has been a godsend if she had helped me do some work that was very difficult or given me support during a difficult time. Those are both examples of someone being a godsend if they're really helpful. Elsie, can you think of something that has been a godsend for you in the recent past?
Oh, a godsend. Maybe my cat is a godsend.
Okay, so you have a really...
He brings me happiness in life.
Okay, yeah, he makes your life much, much better. So yeah, that would be a godsend.
Yes.
Okay, I think that is all the time we have for talking about the advanced sample. Take a closer look at it because there's some really good vocabulary in it, and it still follows the structure we covered today. So it's also a good example on how you can write your own passage. But that is all the time we have for today's unit. We're going to be joining you later in the month to talk about more writing assignments and our translation unit. So we're looking forward to speaking to you then. For English Digest, I'm Seb.
I'm Elsie.
And we'll see you again soon. Bye.